Thank you, Charles. As Charles mentioned, I'm the CISO for InterVenn, and I'm responsible for IT, security, and the engineering organization. I'm thankful to be a part of this event today. I wanted to give you a small glimpse on some of the work that we're doing here. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit more about myself. I mean, I had a lot of years of experience, but I've worked in many different verticals, from gaming, healthcare, and as Charles mentioned, in collaboration companies like WebEx and Zoom. And the more recent one was at Zoom, where we felt that we were doing a lot of great work there, helping other families connect. But it wasn't until I came here at InterVenn that I realized that we could be doing so much more. I could have been doing so much more. Everybody in the company feels the same way that works here, and that is we have the opportunity to make a positive impact to millions of people. And that's something that hits home for me. That's something that I'm very, very excited about. And that's an opportunity that I'm cherishing the most here. There's also selfish reasons why I'm enjoying it here at InterVenn. And one of those is fulfilling a childhood dream of mine, and that is coming back here to the Philippines and actually working here. My family is from Natividad, Pangasinan, and over the years, I've lived here for a few years, went back to the States, and every year I would come back once a year to see my family. But that was only once or twice a year, but now I get a chance to live here, work with other talented people, and see my family members a little bit more. So that's very exciting to me, and it really makes me happy. But part of that happiness extends over to the work that we do here. I mean, working with all these individuals, these talented individuals here at InterVenn in the Philippines, but also working alongside with our peers and doing something great for the company. That's just amazing. So very happy to be part of the InterVenn family. One of the things that we mentioned earlier is that we're making strides in investment into our future at InterVenn, and one of those investments are here in the Philippines. Aldo mentioned that there's an untapped market for talent here in the Philippines, which I strongly believe, because I've talked to a lot of my cousins. They get their IT degrees, but they're moving into other fields, not necessarily in IT. They go into BPOs, or they go into customer service positions, but not necessarily in the field that they actually graduated in. So looking for talent like that, bringing them on board, allowing us to introduce ourselves to other individuals that want to work in the field that they actually went to school for is just amazing. Now, imagine us being able to share this information with a lot of other companies outside of the Philippines. We want to be advocates. We want to be strong advocates for the talent that are here, and hoping that other companies will start looking at future investments to be able to take advantage of that talent here in the Philippines. So, having said that, let me share just one example of some of the work that we're doing, or at least one of the work that we're doing. The beautiful part about managing IT, security, and engineering is that it allows us to be able to converge some of the work that we're doing across most of those teams. There's a terminology in security that we refer to as shift security as far left as possible. What that means is identifying security at the very beginning of any thought about any features, functionality, or anything new that we want to introduce to the company. And that's as early as designing. So as soon as somebody says we want to come up with a feature, we want to start looking at security at that point. So when people design it, when they start having conversations on how do we, who are the customers that are going to use it? What are the features that are available? We're thinking security along the way. And during that process, we're embedding technology into those phases to make sure we identify any vulnerabilities. Now, what a lot of companies do is they usually wait until it's in production. It makes it very hard to address security. People are put in vulnerable states. Now, when you work in healthcare, there's a lot of information that's available about the individual. And so the people that really suffer the most are the individuals whose information that they entrusted in other companies to protect. We recognize that. We want to address that as early as possible. And we have talented people that's going to help us do that. So, having said all that, the experience that we're sharing here is one of happiness. The other part is caring. The one thing that I enjoy the most is, I'm going to say it again, and that is helping others and being able to be part of a wonderful team. So thank you. We're here to help answer any questions that you have.
All right, thank you very much, Andy. All right. So again, before we start our panel, let me introduce our Chief Data Officer, Mr. Dan Siri. So Dan is the Vice President of Bioinformatics and Data Science at InterVenn. With over 15 years of experience mining the genome and the proteome for biological and clinical insights, after joining in late 2017, his team was responsible for training, deploying, and publishing the world's first neural network for mass spectrometry, peak selection, and integration. Prior to starting at InterVenn, Dan led analytical efforts for dozens of scientific publications in cancer, and I will try to say the word as much as I can, neurodegenerative disease. Got it right? Okay. And cardiovascular health at the Mayo Clinic. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in mathematics from the University of Minnesota and a master's in applied statistics from Penn State. His team continues development on advanced machine learning techniques for detecting, quantifying, and utilizing glycoproteins in service of the ultimate goal, moving these novel biomarkers into the clinical practice and improving patient outcomes. So, Mr. Dan Siri, if you don't mind a few words.
Of course. I'm actually supposed to just be a pretty face up here, so apologies for not having a prepared speech. Yeah, still a pretty. Thank you. Yeah, as Charles said, when we started this company, this technology actually existed in plain sight for a long time, and there was actually great studies that had shown the promise of glycoproteomics. But it could not scale, it could not be reproducible, and you could not use this in a clinical workflow to really impact patient lives. And that was the impetus for our early data efforts, was to take this promising technology and actually build artificial intelligence algorithms to make this scale, reproducible, fast, and accurate. So with a lot of help from our colleagues here in the Philippines, we developed this first neural network to really scale glycoproteomic analysis and bring it into the clinic. So as Aldo and Erwin had actually said, this technology had been in plain sight, had been hiding in plain sight for a long time, just was not able to scale. And it was really this technology that allowed us to bring it into the clinic and impact patient lives. So I think this complexity was actually a hidden benefit. As you might think, DNA is kind of more like a blueprint for a house. This is something that can tell you roughly where you might go, but it can't tell you your current state of disease or where you're currently at. And so the complexity of glycoproteomics is actually its hidden strength. You can now see if you're someone who's about to develop cancer and get this treated early when it is still curable. Likewise, this is something that can tell you what medication you should take, avoiding a series of bad medications for your patient journey. And in fact, this is something that can tell you any number of items about your current health state as opposed to what you're predisposed to. So we've actually been working very closely with our Philippine colleagues and actually utilizing the extreme talent here in software engineering and AI, and very excited to see what comes in the coming years as we develop this platform and impact patient lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. All right, so we're now open.
Good morning to everyone. My name is Fred Mendoza from Philippines. First off, to Dr. Dixie. How is the progress of your research already on the biomarking for liver cancer? And do we expect it to be, should we say, be adopted for the Philippine setting? I mean, we know that cancer is one of the leading causes of death in the country, and I think the technology for biomarking would be very beneficial to improve detection and outcomes of cancer patients in the country.
Maraming salamat. Thank you for your question. The candle study is actually looking at the early diagnosis of liver cancer in patients who have hepatitis. And as we speak, 10 million Filipinos have hepatitis. And every one of them is at risk for developing liver cancer. And where is the study right now? We have already enrolled over 700 patients. Our target is 800 patients. So we are on the fourth of our 5-year study. We're actually proud to say that we're probably going to finish a year ahead. And then when we have analyzed the results, we will be able to come up with a data bank for liver cancer, and we will be able to say if we can diagnose it early through the blood, through that single drop of blood. And we're not there yet, but we're looking forward to it. I think maybe by next year, by middle of next year, we will have good news for you, and we will make sure and let you know as soon as we find out.
Thank you, thank you. And I'd like to ask, my last question would be to the founder, co-founder, Mr. Aldo Carsoso. Is he available?
I am.
Hi, yes. Yes, good morning. Good evening to you there sa US. I'd like to ask lang, kasi we know that the technology is so promising, so futuristic, that it could help not only just Filipinos, but also lower income countries to improve their cancer outcomes. And I know, speaking from my own experience with my mother, na who passed away with cancer, and I didn't know that she had cancer. So, how can countries like the Philippines be able to utilize this technology in the way that more people would be able to access these types of early detection and in order for them to get the treatment that they deserve?
That's a great question. Can you folks hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Perfect. I'll have Erwin complete this. Just my statement about, global accessibility. And I make it actually front and center when I tell people that I did not start InterVenn to create yet another liquid biopsy company that is, many thousands of dollars and completely unaffordable for example, the fishermen in the middle of, maybe dun sa Coron or sa Palawan. I actually had an off-site meeting with our leadership, and I told them it would break my heart if that fisherman outside couldn't avail of what we had. So here's the good news about, just glycoproteomics. There are many salient technological details afforded by glycoproteomics that allows us to drastically cut not just how much it costs, but its accessibility. Now, this is not something that we're ready to talk about yet. But if you think of one of the major cost requirements for a diagnostic, pagkuha sa inyo ng dugo, and I'll speak in Tagalog, so I understand na nagtatagalog kayo lahat. Pagkuha sa inyo ng dugo ng phlebotomist, immediately this either goes into a centrifuge or finish siya. That actually goes through this thing called a cold chain. So refrigeration, mahal yung proseso niyan. Maraming to make sure na hindi siya mag-hemolysis or other undesirable effects. The thing with glycoproteomics that we found, it's actually very, very stable outside of the need for refrigeration. That's all I can say, but that already unlocks us the ability to access, in my lifetime, that person in the bundok, para maabutan natin yung mga baryo na malalayo na walang supply chain. That's one of many attributes that we are working toward, so this solution has more global applicability. And actually, the world's experts in front of you. Erwin. Maybe Erwin, you can tell them a bit about how we plan to do this in a global scale, because we didn't create this, you always say, Robin always says, InterVenn, did not create the world just for, a specific set of people. So, Erwin.
Great. So maybe what I could start is at a very philosophical level and tell you that if you were born before 1985, you remember what a payphone or a landline is. Yeah. And in some countries like Latin America, various other parts, it took years to install a landline. This was a common thing. And the big technological event, which we all hold in our hands today, and we feel almost naked without, is the mobile phone. The mobile phone came to be because of advancements in battery technology, software, and cell phone and cell tower technology. We believe at InterVenn that change has not occurred in healthcare. We are making investments and have a technological advantage and drive to be able to take a clinical dependent, cold chain dependent way of assessing health that is costly and distribute that, much like the cell phone, to remote parts of the world where biological samples are temperature stable, available, and accurate. And so we will be sharing some news here in September, October timeframe globally about data that we will have available to demonstrate the ability to do this. And our strategy is to very quickly not only look at things like liver cancer, but various other diseases, even outside of oncology. InterVenn has the largest pipeline of indications in the world for clinical diagnostics. In 4 years, we've been able to find unique signatures, all based on glycoproteomics, for 30 diseases. Early stage screening, all the way to late stage triaging, which patient will respond to which drug or combinations of drugs. This is what's going to turn the conversation from this drug saved my life to this test saved my life. And I'll have Dan Siri, he just add to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're really utilizing technology in a unique way at InterVenn to realize this vision. And, we all know about the stories in the news. Artificial intelligence is actually a double-edged sword. This can be used for good or evil. I think we're formally in the former camp, and importantly, utilizing this to really exponentially increase our capabilities, much like 10 years ago, no one had facial recognition software on a phone. Much in the same way, we're utilizing this in healthcare to exponentially increase our ability to detect disease, to measure these biomarkers, but importantly, also exponentially to drive costs down. And really those two are intertwined. And so in this way, I think we'll be able to bring this technology to literally everyone. And I'm very excited for the future of this platform.
Thank you very much. Did you answer your question? Thank you. We have a few more questions. We'll take one from the Zoom first. We have Mr. Tyrone Diaz from Inquirer. Tyrone, do you want to raise your question? You have the audio. Is Tyrone there?
Hello.
There we go, Tyrone, we can hear you.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. I'm Tyrone Piet from Inquirer. Earlier, it was mentioned that by the end of 2022, InterVenn would have brought over ₱500 million into the Philippine economy. Kindly asking for further explanation on this, and how did you come up with this figure? And also, I would just like to ask, how many employees are you eyeing to hire this year?
Can you hear me?
If you could push your mic a little further so that the people in Zoom can hear you.
Without the permission of our CFO, I just added the monthly costs, our capital costs, our investment in the network operating center of the global operation is here in the Philippines also. So all those various investment, payroll, if you add them all will amount to over that amount. For the employees, number of employees right now, we have about 150, but we are on pause. We were supposed to hire more personnel, but being prudent because of the market situation globally, we are temporarily on pause. But when things settle down and the market becomes more stable, we expect to increase more personnel. The capacity of our office here in Bolio is for 250 concurrent users, but we can do a scheduling and it can have more than 400 employees.
All right, thank you very much, Axel. Tyrone, are you okay with the answer?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Tyrone. Can we have here from the audience?
Hello, good morning. My name is PJ Kanya. I'm with Escort Philippines. I had the pleasure of chatting with Aldo 2 years ago, actually, when I first did a story on InterVenn. So it's a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you for having me. My question is about InterVenn as a business. Back in 2020, it was announced that the company raised $34 million in a Series B fundraising, and then that's on top of the $9.4 million that you raised in 2018. I'm curious where you are now in, the fundraising stages. Are you self-sustaining now, or basically that already? Thank you.
Thank you for staying on the journey with us, and welcome back. This time last year, actually, we announced that we had raised $201 million, additional to the amounts that you had mentioned. As Axel mentioned, and the tall gentleman, very tall gentleman waving his hand back there is actually our Chief Financial Officer. So he'll be able to either deny or verify this claim afterwards. But we believe that in order to really deliver the solutions that we've shared with you and have in the past with you specifically, this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. And so we owe this challenge and this level of attention and persistence for a very long set of products that will enable and impact healthcare. Our cash position is enviable, even in these markets. We have come out of stealth mode after the last financial raise, the $201 million. We are actively collaborating with multiple key opinion leaders across various diseases, additional hospitals that now have the conviction and thirst to utilize our technology and explore that further. We have multiple partnerships with pharmaceutical and biotech companies, and we are continuing to expand our footprint and align with governments that want to bring this technology at lower costs and access to patients. So I think that you will hear more over the next 12 months of potential large stories that we can share with you. But we are very, very bullish on where we are from a financing point of view and proud of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Erwin. We'll take a question from Zoom. We have Jess from ABS-CBN. Jess?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Jess.
Can you hear me? Yes. My question is, when will these liquid biopsy testing kits become available, and how much or what percentage is made by Filipinos? Thank you.
It's a great question. So, the world's largest oncology conference, which was held in early June, which is ASCO in the United States, we actually launched our first commercially available test. The test name is Dawn, D-A-W-N. It's actually dedicated to a family member of Aldo. And the product is designed to be able to tell patients with metastatic melanoma or late-stage skin cancer which combinations of very effective but unfortunately very expensive drugs will give them the best outcome. This is the first of several similar tests that will become available every 6 months, and you can expect to hear from us. Our first market is in the United States. We are working to increase awareness of the test, utilization, and we expect, like our other products, to enter other markets, including Asia Pacific, EU5, and Latin America. I would ask you to stay tuned for when we make those announcements. We are actively speaking with single payer systems in various territories outside of the United States. And what I can tell you is that we are not only eager, but incredibly impatient about bringing these products. However, we want to do this right for the right territories. Hopefully that answers your question.
Are you okay with the answer, Jess?
There was another question about percentage of Filipinos are instrumental for the state drugs.
About half of the employees at InterVenn today are from the Philippines. What you will hear if you speak to any of our employees, whether they're from Australia, San Francisco, Manila, is that there is no headquarters at InterVenn. We are truly distributed. Let me really highlight this with an example. At the beginning of the COVID pandemic, a lot of companies struggled to continue their work. They had to figure out how to work remotely. In our case, we have laboratories where scientists are required to handle samples. And a lot of companies lost several quarters in productivity. This never happened at InterVenn. The software that is built here enables us to conduct an experiment from samples in country A to be either analyzed in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, or South San Francisco, for the data to be analyzed in Melbourne, Australia, Manila, Philippines, San Diego, or San Francisco, like that. And so when we think about where the talent is and what we need to achieve our mission, that gives us a clear perspective of where we should grow accordingly with the funds that are available to us. So you will see additional growth. I don't think this office space is big enough for what we're looking at doing. That is a great problem to have.
Thank you very much, Erwin. Do we have questions from the audience here? We have one question from Zoom. We have Lani De Leon from Zest Magazine. Lani, are you on the line? No? Let me just read the question then. Lani has two connected questions, maybe for Dan and Erwin. So number one is, what are the advantages of liquid biopsy? And number two is more technical, which is, how are liquid biopsies used in diagnosing cancer?
There are a lot of advantages to liquid biopsy beyond what you might think of in traditional diagnostics. First and foremost, a blood draw or a finger prick or any other relatively non-invasive procedure is going to be preferred by everyone compared to a large needle and a tissue biopsy or a surgical excision or any other truly invasive procedure. And so the overall goal is to match and in fact exceed the capabilities of those procedures with just a simple blood draw. Secondly, there's actually a hidden scientific benefit in that tissue itself is highly heterogeneous. And you can see that across your skin, just looking how different it is from one cell to another. Blood itself is actually highly homogeneous. And that lends itself to a lot of strong advantages in terms of reproducible and accurate analysis. So long term, the vision and goal of liquid biopsy is going to supplant all of these invasive procedures.
Dr. Trixie, do you have something to add?
I just wanted to add that it's going to take a shorter time for the results of the biopsy to come out if you get it from a drop of blood, as opposed to you have to get tissue, it has to be processed, it has to undergo procedures, and it takes maybe 5 to 7 days at least, as opposed to
Just drawing
minutes
blood.
or seconds, I don't know.
Right. So there's a turnaround time that's significantly quicker, and Erwin also has a.
Just to add to this, one of the distinguishing features about a liquid biopsy that is glycoproteomic based, like our technology, versus DNA or cell-free DNA, is that those technologies rely on a little bit of DNA from a cancer cell in your body to leach out, and for the physician or the analyst to be able to play what I call the needle in the haystack game. And so that's where that technology is limited to not have the best performance for early stage, because there just isn't enough tumor volume. In the glycoproteomic paradigm, we are taking a snapshot of circulating proteins that are involved in what's known as diffuse post-immune response, which is essentially a complex biological and immunological system that is constantly taking the pulse of what's going on in your body. And so the signatures that we develop are really able to pick up that early detection and sometimes pre-disease state, which is very unique to the layer of biology we're able to access.
Thank you, Erwin. We have a couple of questions here. We'll take this one first. We'll move to the data view.
Good morning. Arisa from Manila Society. I just want to ask again, Doctora, you mentioned a while ago that the sample is, you have to get the blood. Is there any special procedure or before you taking the sample, before you could take the sample?
I would love to be able to answer your question, but I think Dan is probably more familiar with that process. So.
To put it simply, no. You don't have to fast. You don't have to get a good night's sleep. You don't have to avoid cheeseburgers. You can just take this blood draw and have a reasonable expectation of an accurate test result. And again, to Erwin's point, that's actually a distinct advantage of glycoproteomics itself. While this is an indicator on your dynamic state of health, it's not so dynamic that it's worried about your diet or exercise routines or sleep schedule. And this is also in contrast to a number of other biomarkers. So yes, in short, simple blood draw at any time is good.
All right, thank you very much, Dan. We have one more question.
Yeah, hi, I'm Katie Chua from Manila. So I just wanted to ask, I'm very curious because you said that the tests are easy to do, or I think you rolled out something in the US with the home kit, right? So would it be like badly put, kind of like the antigen test that you do, that you can, anyone can do it at home and then you can actually test it yourself, or you have to go to like a specific office to do the test? And if it's like home use, how can you be sure of how the process they did it correctly, or like how would they actually know the diagnosis of that?
That's a terrific question, and I'm so glad you asked that question. So our current tests that we're rolling out are highly controlled. The last thing that we want to do is give the wrong diagnosis, or God forbid, to the wrong patient. And so all the testing that's currently conducted is a single blood draw that is shipped to a central laboratory where it is then analyzed by our process. We are actively working on developing the technology and the quality components to make sure that taking a dry blood spot or a finger prick test is equal to a venous draw at a clinic. The advantages and what we can report on right now is that the sample is stable at room temperature with both methods. And again, that's an advantage of the technology that we use. Now, we all understand at this point, I think, unfortunately, the difference between an antigen test and a PCR test. Unfortunately, we're all familiar with this. What we are offering now, in terms of quality, is the equivalent of the PCR test. The at-home antigen test is something that's coming. But we want to make the antigen test, as equal in terms of performance to the PCR test. As an example.
Sorry, another question. So since you're doing the kits, like right now, it's for example, just for skin cancer, right? So do you have a rollout that next time, when you do a test, it would test completely like all, if you have all the diseases in tow, right? So kind of like, I don't know if you're familiar with Circle DNA, like I see it all the time. It lists down everything. It just lists down everything. So I was wondering if that's in the pipeline.
Yeah, I think you've been hacking into my emails, because these are ongoing conversations that we have internally. And to go back to the cell phone example that I used, the idea and the vision is for us to have one test that tells you, we believe that you look like a person that has XYZ. And it would really be a good idea for you to go and see this medical professional. I'll give you some facts that are predominantly for the United States. A primary care physician in the United States, the average age is 55 years old and climbing. In the United States, we have a problem that people with medical degrees don't become primary care physicians. They specialize. So that's the first problem. The second problem in the United States, and this is also common in Europe, by the way, is that an average physician spends about 18 minutes with a patient. And 10 of those minutes is filling out forms or typing on a computer. Now, many years ago, and when I met Aldo, I shared these things with him, and he smiled. And he said, when do you think patients will feel comfortable with taking a test at home? And I said, 10 to 15 years. Boy, was I wrong. This has made it very acceptable for patients to take a test at work, at home, at school. And so we believe that's accelerated and opened up the market for patients to take a little bit more responsibility about their health, but obviously at a price that makes sense to them. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Great questions. We'll take one last question, and if there are, we'll take two more questions. And after that, if you need time one-on-ones with our executives, please feel free to walk up to Marzi and her team, and we'll make sure to set that up. Second to the last question.
Hi, my name is Rain Cheng. My question is, we're talking. I'm not sure if you discussed this earlier. We're talking about early detection. So how early can or should we take this test?
That is a great question. So for the test that we just launched, it is really tailored towards metastatic melanoma or late stage skin cancer. So that test is not for every patient. For early detection screening, it really does depend on things like family history, your age, and type of lifestyle. Now, the test that I described from the previous question, we foresee is a test that would be complementary to, for example, an annual physical. Okay? But the current standard guidelines in the United States and various other countries is that if you, for instance, had parents that succumbed to a particular ailment or disease, you should start to screen for that 10 years prior to that, whether it's heart disease, cancer, etc. The other factor, which is quite a recent development, is that people who are sequencing their genome, like Aldo mentioned earlier, they are getting, some of them, with a low incidence rate, a risk factor. So we know, for instance, that if you have the gene BRCA1 or BRCA2, you're a higher likelihood to develop reproductive cancers. That's very informative. Unfortunately, we can't tell you when, or with a high degree of certainty. And so that's where we believe the test that we'll bring to the clinic will enable somebody to monitor and not have to get that bad news after the fact, or live with the thought that their days are numbered, or perhaps they have a lot longer than they think.
Likewise, there's a long-term vision here that is pretty unique to our platform, where you're coupling the power of a stable but dynamic glycoproteomic signature with the fact that this is a non-invasive test. And so you can envision taking this routinely simply to assess your current state and whether it has changed. And long-term, we see this as being extremely preventative in terms of diagnosing, understanding, and treating your current health state before things become serious and literally you not being blindsided by disease. And so that's actually a really unique thing that we are hoping to bring to the table in the hopefully not too distant future.
One last question. Here in the Philippines, we have this superstition or notion that these tests, however non-invasive they are, can actually make cancer worse or cause its onset. That is actually one of the biggest barriers in the country. Do you have any programs that addresses this?
I think I'm very underqualified to answer that question because I'm not from the Philippines. But I can tell you that I'm glad I have colleagues that can help me. But I can tell you that a similar barrier exists in Latin America, and that's with infectious diseases, actually. This actually came from the early days of the HIV epidemic, which I worked on these tests. And the technology can obviously help, but I think educational empowerment is something that worked during the HIV epidemic to be able not to have a stigma associated with the detection of the disease or the progression of the disease. Unfortunately, that's the extent that I can comment. I'm going to definitely call in a friend here.
That belief I see a lot in my clinic when patients don't want to biopsy particular mass, especially the ones that are deep, because along the needle track, they're afraid that it's going to see. That has not been proven scientifically in any cancer, except maybe in liver, which is the other reason why we really don't want to do that, and maybe renal cancer, kidney cancer. But the chances of that happening is really, really extremely low, as opposed to the benefits that you're going to get if you go ahead with the procedure. However, if you don't need to do anything invasive like that, or even small incision, sometimes in breast cancer, that is also the fear of some women, baka magaling yung sakit. That's not going to be an issue anymore if you can do it by doing a blood test. So certainly that's another advantage that will remove that myth or make it obsolete.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Tracy. Somebody slipped me a $5, so we're gonna have 2 questions. Sorry, this one.
Hi, good morning. My name is Karina Ramos of Digital Filipina. First off, congratulations on the launch of your news in the Philippines. My question is, can you give us an estimate how much is the cost of this test or blood test with this procedure? Is it affordable?
That's a great question. Our mission is nobody should be blindsided by disease. You're not going to be satisfied with my answer. I'm telling you that now, okay? But I'm going to tell you what our mission isn't. Our mission is not no American should be blindsided by cancer by a test that's marketed and sold by us. That's a very narrow way of looking at the world, we believe. You heard our co-founder and CEO speak about bringing this technology to a fisherman in the Philippines or a farmer in Bolivia. At this point, we cannot comment for markets that we have not entered. The primary reason behind that is that we are actively in conversations with various healthcare groups and governments to help bring those technologies into those territories. And so I apologize for not answering the question directly, but I think I would encourage you to speak with some of my other colleagues about how we're looking and working at bringing these tests to those territories.
Thank you, Irvin. One last question?
For my last question is, since we're now curious about the product, so how, when, and where can we order the test kit?
Yes. So our melanoma test, which is a late-stage melanoma, right now is only available in the United States. That test has to be ordered by an oncologist. Those are the regulatory requirements to ensure quality and build credibility with patients and physicians. This is the start of a very long journey. I think it's safe to say that the Philippines press or public will not be blindsided by a test that we launched without notifying you. And so we will work with you for when and what test we will bring to the market, and I think you'll be excited.
Likewise, the more fibers you pass to Charles, the faster they'll get done.
All right, thank you very much. Again, if there are further questions,